morning, and welcome to another episode of Guest House TV. I'm Adam Helman, the Executive Director of the Guest House, and with me today is our special guest, John Zolper, from our partner program at Rush, the Road Home program. Today, in honor of Veterans Day, we're going to be talking about the programming we do with veterans at the Guest House in partnership with Road Home. So, just to remind you, the Guest House is a nonprofit in Chicago, and we provide temporary lodging for patients and people who need treatment when they need to be near the hospital or near where they're getting treatment. And in addition to medical patients, a huge population that we serve are veterans who are getting help through the Road Home program. So, I'm going to stop talking for a minute. And Joe, why don't you introduce yourself, and then we'll talk about the Road Home program a little bit.
Awesome. Thank you, Adam. Joseph Zolper. I'm the manager of veteran outreach and networking at the Road Home program. I've actually been with the program for just under a year. I'm coming up on my anniversary, coming here soon. I'm a Chicagoland native. I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, Hanover Park, went to Schaumburg High School, graduated and attended Illinois State University down in Bloomington Normal, so I'm an Illinois native. And then did ROTC there where in I think about 2015 I graduated and also commissioned as a infantry officer in the U.S. Army. I immediately, or shortly after, I guess, from my graduation, went to Fort Benning in Georgia for some infantry training. And then after that, I was stationed at my active duty installation out in Fort Carson, Colorado Springs. Out of there, I did a deployment to Afghanistan in 2018, returned in 19, and then spent a couple more years in the Army, and then got out in almost about 4 years ago, closer to maybe 3.5 now. And my wife and I stayed locally in Colorado Springs. It's hard to leave Colorado with all the mountains and great things to do. And then I started almost immediately getting out of the Army, working for Amazon in operations management. And shortly after, starting with Amazon, I always kind of call it Army 2.0. It's a grind. They work you hard, but I learned a lot, incredible experiences, and worked with incredible people. But there was a scratch I couldn't itch in terms of like finding meaning and purpose in my life, or it really is more specifically in my work. So, I got familiar with what Amazon calls their Amazon Warriors, and it's basically an employee resource group focused around the military community. So I started a chapter at my building, and I was like, ooh, that scratch is getting itched a little bit. I feel something here. And shortly after my wife and I welcomed our son, JJ, into the world about a little over 18 months ago, on paternity leave while working at Amazon, I was like, I think I need to do something different with my work life. I was working night shift. I knew this was not going to be conducive to a family environment. So I knew I was like, I got to do something in the veteran sphere as a job, as a career moving forward. So started looking on LinkedIn, found the Road Home program, which obviously based here in Chicago. Back home for my wife and I, applied. And it was the perfect situation. It paired my two passions really in life beyond my family, the veteran and military experience and community, and mental health, which is something that I struggled with while in the military. So I'm very passionate on other folks from this community finding help as well. So yeah, the stars have never aligned more for my wife and I to move back home, for me to land in a dream job in a dream organization. Wow. So it just worked out perfectly.
That's great. That's great. And can you tell us a little bit about what the Road Home program is, what the focus is, what you do at the program?
Of course, yeah. So the Road Home program is attached to Rush University Medical Center. So we're part of the academic medical center here in Chicago. And we're essentially a nonprofit mental health care clinic for service members, veterans, and their families. We provide treatment for PTSD, military sexual trauma, depression, anxiety, all at no cost to the clients. And we're able to serve some folks from across really the world. Most of our patients are within the continental United States, but we'll get a few folks from like the Netherlands and Japan, and some folks who may have retired out there or currently stationed out there. And what we're able to bring folks in from across the world is to our accelerated treatment program. Essentially what it is about 6 months worth of outpatient therapy into 2 weeks. Rip it off like a Band-Aid. It's a very intensive approach from an outpatient perspective. It's not inpatient. It's about a step down from that. And the results we see from that accelerated model are just beyond incredible compared to your traditional outpatient, treatment. But we also have an outpatient clinic as well for the Chicagoland area, for Illinois, and also Indiana residents that we can serve. Again, everything that we provide from our outpatient clinic to the accelerated treatment, everything is at no cost to the clients.
Right.
So that's travel, lodging, food. Obviously, lodging is supported through the guest house, which is a crucial part of our client's journey. We're also able to connect some of our patients with additional resources that might not touch in the mental health sphere, might be like recreational or financial support. We have connections with other partners in this sphere.
Right. And sometimes those secondary services are very important because mental health it's not like a cut on your finger where you put a Band-Aid on it. It's your entire life, your entire person. Right. So our interaction between our organizations, our partnership, is for that accelerated program, the intensive outpatient program. People come in for 2 weeks of treatment. It'll be a group of now up to 18 or 20 veterans at one time. And they'll basically, from a Monday to the following Friday, spend their days during the week working with the professionals at the Road Home program, and then they come back and they stay with us at night during the program, and that's all with no out-of-pocket to the veterans. We're very proud to serve that population. Now, what is your particular job at the Road Home program?
Oh, excellent question. So as the manager of veteran outreach and networking, the best way I kind of explain what I do and what my team does is we're the sales team of the veteran, of the veteran community or the military community for the Road Home program. So we're traveling around the country. We're, meeting with partners, meeting with potential patients, community groups, leaders throughout this kind of, arena of veteran and military support to educate them and spread awareness of our program and really to connect the gaps, fill those gaps on, receiving this type of care. So we've changed, not necessarily changed the course, but focus on areas that we predominantly haven't in the past, underserved communities, particularly geographic locations, active duty service members. So really the outreach team is really just to spread as much awareness of this program. And we're also the kind of the finger on the scale on really the understanding of the military culture for our own staff as well.
Right.
All of my staff, team of 6, are 5 of 6 are veterans themselves. And then we have a Gold Star mother on staff as well. So we have folks from the Army, from the Marines, to a family member who really understand the military culture, who can help some of our staff who may not be familiar with the military culture to really understand, how the community really operates.
Yes, right. Yep. Right, that's really important because some of the therapists don't have that background. So when you talk about the if it's not prying too much. So when you were deployed overseas, you were deployed, you were in danger. What was the service like to you, the support that you received when you came back and when you were discharged?
Oh, great question. So that's a tough one because, it's almost in two perspectives that when I came home, I so badly wanted to just be normal, quote unquote normal. And I was trying to convince myself so hard that I am normal. I'm just like I was before. I had some, pretty terrible experiences, but I also had great experiences as well. So I should be still the same person. And as much as I could try to convince myself, obviously the end result was I was different, just like everybody is, no matter what their experience is and where. So my family and friends, beyond supportive at every single step. They were almost in front of my face at all times saying, hey, we're here to support, we're here to listen. But unfortunately, just, like many other veterans or service members returning home, I didn't feel comfortable necessarily telling my friends and family, right? The only people I felt comfortable with were those who I deployed with, which is a very normal thing that, our community goes through. So In terms of like very specific support, tying this back to mental health, is some of my friends and much of my family were trying to convince me to seek help. They saw me struggling. I was very quiet and reserved about it, but they saw me struggling. Especially my wife was the largest proponent for me trying to get some help and get taken care of, right, and get that support that I desperately needed. But really, the folks that really tipped the scale were those who I actually served with overseas.
Right.
They're like, hey, sir, I think it's about time you get yourself checked out. And I'm very open about the real reason, I guess, that solidified me actually seeking help was the mental health clinician that was attached to my specific unit when we got back. His brother was actually, we were attached to his older brother's unit when we were deployed. So when I came back and I was like, you probably know everything that happened over there, right? So I felt a little bit more comfortable going to somebody who may have already known some of my experiences.
Absolutely.
And then from then on after, again, friends and family at every corner, asking how they can support.
Right. What I've heard, and again, civilian my whole life, so never served, is that the military, part of the mindset is it's very hard to ask for help.
Yeah, it is. I think the culture is changing.
Yeah.
I think it has it's been a slow burn, slow change.
Right.
I would argue over the past few years. I saw the change when I was still serving, and I've seen the change even further since being out. And I won't necessarily go into all the reasons why the military community doesn't necessarily seek out help. I think it's pretty evident. The culture of being active duty, the culture of you're this big, tough, strong soldier. There's a lot of cultural aspects to it, and returning home. The VA, in my opinion, does everything they possibly can to support this community.
Right.
They have just a crazy, huge caseload, and they can't help everybody.
Right.
And I think that's where an organization like us really, truly fill those gaps where it's like, okay, we can help decrease that caseload. We can take in patients who have maybe less than an honorable discharge or who are not considered veterans by the VA.
Right.
So I think organizations like us and others really help change that culture around, hey, I think I can go get help, and that doesn't mean I'm anything less.
Right. I think that's really important. One of the things that we talk about when we tell people about the program in depth is the idea of people being able to get help even if they haven't had an honorary discharge, which is a limitation to some VA programming, and also the idea of how long they've served.
Yes.
So to qualify for the Road Home program, you need to have done what? What makes you a veteran?
So the best way I can I guess describe in a short couple words is our doors are very wide open. Really, what it comes down to is if you put a uniform on for a day, we can support. We do have some exclusionary criteria, but it's more on like if we're the right level of care.
Yes.
That's really where people are excluded.
Yeah.
In terms of inclusion, it's very big, right? All eras of service pre, post 9/11. Regardless of discharge status, regardless of VA eligibility, regardless of diagnosis. A lot of service members get out of the military without having a PTSD or MST diagnosis. And some folks get that diagnosis after, once coming to us because it was never addressed prior to. So, and we've been expanding more on in the military family member world as well. But for veterans and service members, it's nearly as wide open as you can get for a clinic like ours.
Yeah. So that's actually the time when people served is really interesting too, because some of the programs that I'm aware of really focus on post 9/11 veterans.
Yes.
Which a big population, very deserving of our support, but no more so than people who served in the Balkans, people who served in earlier conflicts, people who had deployments all over the place at all different times. So being open to that group is it's a wonderful thing, and it's interesting. It's been interesting to see the different veterans who come through when we meet people who are older, who just served longer ago. Now, you said that you're now doing more with active duty in addition to veterans. Tell me about that a little bit.
Yeah, so I guess that was more of a passion project for me coming into this organization, a little bit less than a year ago, is since I was so, recently removed from active duty, I saw the need for an organization like the Road Home program in DoD, or at least in collaboration with DoD forces. Mm-hmm. And the way I characterize it is really two big things, and it's one, being proactive with your mental health. Right. Let's take care of some of these mental health struggles closer to the event if it is a traumatic experience, versus waiting until transition. When you're transitioning out of the military, it's a very hard time for a lot of veterans. Financially, occupation, not knowing what you're going to do next in your life. I can relate to that. Family struggles, and a lot of the time during your transition is you put off your mental health, you put off your well-being, and then that mental health creeps up on you after quite a few years. So the way I look at active duty is like, hey, let's almost get to the root cause. Let's get as close as we can to the traumatic event, or when these symptoms start to persist, and take care of it now. And then maybe, once you transition, you're in a little bit better shape than if you had not gone through a program like ours. And the second part is something I can relate to, that when I sought help when I was active duty, I was fully convinced that it was going to ruin my career. Even though I ended up still getting out, years later, it had nothing to do with me seeking help. And that was one of the stigmas for active duty, is if I seek help, it's going to ruin my career. It's something that the DoD is still fighting, against that culture. Now, seeking help, and depending on the diagnosis, can temporarily impact your career, depending on flight status, as long as you're not, if you are a potential risk to yourselves and others, that for all obvious reasons could potentially impact your career. However, there are a lot of ways around that, and going to a program like ours, or, even seeking help through your DoD, resources like how I did, I think is still better in the long run for your career.
Of course. And it seems like it is, as a safety and preservation issue, very important, because if you're struggling and you are still under that same pressure or same stress, worse things can happen than if you get help to them. What about, so we've talked, people think about PTSD, and they do often think about, combat. And we have almost half the people we see in the Road Home program have military-related trauma that has nothing to do with having served in facing fire or anything else. They domestically deployed military. Let's talk about that population a little bit. So that's the MST, or the Military Sexual Trauma Group.
So before I talk about MST, I do want to drive home what you mentioned, that, we don't only see combat veterans, right? We have folks who are struggling with depression, anxiety, that have nothing to do with the, combat. Those who may have encountered a training accident, which unfortunately is a very prevalent, occurrence in the military. Or it could be another traumatic event that necessarily might not have to do exactly with the military. So we do see quite a few folks that are not combat related. And in relation to the MST, the Military Sexual Trauma Cohort, for those folks who aren't familiar, is that something I think our program really prides ourselves on. Obviously I'm a little bit biased, but I think we are one of the leaders in the arena for treating military sexual trauma. The way our cohorts and our programming works is nearly half the population, like you mentioned, is a military sexual trauma cohort. And it's predominantly populated by women, by females, but also at times men as well, right? MST is not just to women, it is also to men as well. So our programming, helps connect some other MST clients with one another through these cohorts, right? And an interesting thing is, versus the example of a combat veteran versus an MST veteran, is their views on the military might be totally different, right? That uniform may have a pretty triggering symptom, or they have a very highly negative connotation on that uniform because they received a traumatic experience sexually under that uniform. So our program is very focused individually on
Right.
MST, clients, knowing that it could potentially be a factor amongst
Right.
other factors as well.
Okay. This is going to be a question out of left field, but since we're around Veterans Day and I think
course.
about this, the phrase "thank you for your service," which a lot of civilians like to throw out there when we talk to veterans. And I've learned a little bit about that just by working with veterans now through the Road Home program since 2016 and interacting with them. What about, do you like when people say that to you? What is your reaction to it?
So I guess I'll preface it, but this is just in my opinion.
It's a personal question. So,
Yeah, it's a great question. It's not the first time I've gotten that question.
Right.
I personally, I don't mind hearing "thank you for your service." Does it make me feel a little bit weird? Yeah. I'd be lying if I said no. I just saw what I was doing as my job.
Right.
It was my call to duty. Right. It was more of an honor to do what I was doing. So yeah, it was a job, but I felt like I was privileged to do what I did.
Right.
In some cases. So thanking me for that, it is a little bit weird. I don't think negatively on it, of course. So yeah, I guess that's how I view specifically that comment. But what I really appreciate, I would say more than thank you for your service, is folks asking questions and engaging in the community and participating in the community. And what I mean by those is asking questions like, hey, I work for a bank and I'm a manager and 2 of my employees are veterans.
Right.
How can I best lead them?
Yes.
What, they have something called a DD-214. What does that mean? This person was stationed at this unit. What's the culture of that unit? What can I expect? So really trying to understand the military culture and the community to best support, engage, and sometimes lead them.
Right.
That's one of the most exciting things I've seen. Participating in the military community, that could be volunteering for the Road Home program, some other organizations like Team Red, White, and Blue, Wounded Warrior Project, engaging in those organizations or attending a Veterans Day ceremony or celebration or, something around, military holidays, Memorial Day as well. That's a way you can engage as well as participate as well. So I personally, if someone would come to me and say, do you want me to say that comment or do something else? I would say I would rather you learn more about us and engage and participate in this community rather than saying thank you for your service. Although it's still nice to hear, and I know it comes from a well-meaning part. But yeah, it's a weird dynamic that I feel weird about it because I know it's so heartfelt and, a lot of my friends sort of feel the same way. So maybe that's a cultural thing for the global war on terror veterans.
Yeah.
Obviously Vietnam veterans and, Korea veterans, many of them were not thanked for their service. They were not welcomed home like how we were, right? So, whenever, sometimes I speak to a Vietnam veteran, I like to say, hey, welcome home. Yeah. Because they were never welcomed home. Right. So I think it depends on the era of veteran sometimes too.
Got it. Great. Okay, we're wrapping up here. Final question. So what do you think were some of the best things you learned from being in the military? What did it provide you as an experience?
Ooh, that's a tough one.
I'm sorry, and I asked that one with like a minute left.
You're good. I would say my, passion for taking care of people. I think that goes beyond just me being a manager or a leader. Is I love to support people around me, whether that's employees, peers, friends, or family. I want to figure out what they need and how I can be value added or support added to that. Right. That's something that my parents taught me is always be value added to those that you work with. Especially my dad is a U.S. Army veteran as well, and he was an enlisted guy as an officer. He taught me very early on, like, hey, you need to be out there with the enlisted folks, supporting and working with them, getting your hands dirty. So that's the biggest takeaway I think I got from the military.
Really interesting. So as we finish up our time here, first of all, I want to thank you very much for your partnership with the Guest House. It's great working with you. We really enjoy it, and thank you for being on the show today. Is there anything you'd like to share as a closing thought as we're here celebrating Veterans Day?
Yes. All I'd like to say is if you know a service member, a veteran, or a military family member that could potentially utilize this program, this incredible program of the Road Home program, feel free to look into us. You never know what someone might be struggling with, and they can go to roadhomeprogram.org, and you'll find all of our information on there. And if they'd like to connect with me personally, you can reach out to me via email, Joseph_R_ZOLPER@rush.edu.
That's great. That's great. And if you'd like to find out more about the Guest House, you can always look us up at guesthousechicago.org. You can see the email address right there, which is great. As we move on, it's the end of the year, giving time. Both the Rush Road Home program and the Guest House are nonprofits. I'm not going to ask you to give, but if you're interested in learning, you can look us both up on the internet, and every little bit does help for people who are able to support organizations like ours or who want to volunteer. And that's a really important thing. Joe talked about that and the opportunity to interact with people who could use your help. And whether that help is serving them dinner, being a volunteer at the Guest House, whether it's something at the Road Home program, there are things that we can all do to just help folks have an easier day. And volunteerism is one of the great sort of tonics when you're feeling down in your own life. Volunteering, giving a little bit of yourself, and realizing that other people are dealing with different things is a just wonderful, wonderful experience. So, thank you very much for watching tonight. Joe, thanks so much for being on the show with us. It's always great to see you, and remember, you're always a guest at the Guest House. Thanks a lot, and good night.